Okay, you're on. You're live. You're live.
That's my gavel. Let's go ahead and get started. This is the Water Resources Advisory Committee WRAC for Wednesday, April 3rd. And we're going to start with determination of quorum. So if you are a voting member today, could you please raise your hand?
Well, I'm still paying according to that signage. Depending if we
16?
Yeah, 16.
All right, thank you very much. We have a quorum of 16. And with that, we'll go around and introduce ourselves and who you are representing. I'm Andy Pease, City Council for San Luis Obispo.
Courtney Howard, Water Resources Division, Public Works.
Harold Wright, Accountant, Public Works. Jim Garing, District Corps Rep.
Steve Simpson, Shannon San Juan, Water District.
George Kendall, Farm Bureau.
Tim Walters, Development at Large.
Desi Lance, City of River Beach.
Greg Grewald, District 5 Representative.
Dennis Lux, District 1 Representative.
Bill Garfinkel, District 2.
Charlie Cody, S&T Mutual Water Company.
Ariel Ellis, Golden State Water Company.
Tony Lindstrom, Golden State Water.
Adrian Coons, Golden State Water.
James Green, Farm Bureau.
Long George, City Board.
Shirley Henson, alternate and director of Oceana CSD.
Ed Eby, Apollo CSD.
Craig Armstrong, Napomo CSD.
Michael Borman, City of San Luis Obispo.
Cynthia Ruffalo, Oceana CSD.
Mary Greening, The Environment.
Coastal San Luis, RCD.
David King, Environment at Large.
Christine Mulholland, Environment at Large.
Brendan Clark, County Public Works.
And Ray Dienzo, County Public Works.
All right, thank you all so much. With that, we're going to go to item 2, which is approval of the March 6, 2019 meeting minutes. Any comments, Mr. Greening?
Thank you. Yeah, they are perfectly accurate as they read, but if we want a better reasoning for a particular motion, middle of page 2, rain and reservoir reports, where I asked about including San Antonio Reservoir, if we replace, despite it not being a county reservoir, with due to the proposed project to link it with Lake Nacimiento, then that gives a better explanation of why. And I'm very thankful to actually see it in our rainfall and reservoir reports this month, and I presume ongoing.
Great. Any objections to that modification, changing that to due to its link to Nacimiento?
The proposed project to link it with Lake Nacimiento. It ain't happened yet, but we will probably get a word in edgewise about it at some point.
Yeah, and we are scheduling a update to WRAC on that topic.
Move to approve as amended.
Great. I have a motion
I'll
from
second.
Tim and second from Eric. This is a roll call vote.
So a motion by Tim Walters, second by Eric Greening.
Yep.
Okay. Dennis Laux,
Abstain.
Bill Garfinkel,
Yes.
is Linda Cipher?
She-
Okay. That's right, she didn't make
right,
it.
she didn't know.
Jim Garing, please.
Abstain.
Greg Graywall,
Abstain.
Tim Walters,
Yes.
Christy Mulholland,
Yes.
Eric Greening,
Yes.
David Chipping,
Yes.
Linda Chipping,
Yes.
Tom Mora. Great. Is John Reed here? Okay. George Kendall.
I was not present, but my alternate was. He says yes, so I say yes.
Okay. Anthony Lindstrom.
Yes.
Steve Sinton.
Yes.
Okay. Lan George.
Abstain.
Andy Pease.
Yes.
Craig Armstrong,
Yes.
Cynthia Replogle.
My alternate also says yes, so.
Okay, all right. And I think that's it. Is there someone that walked in that I didn't call on the roll? Okay, motion carries.
Thank you. All right, we're going to go on to ongoing updates. I'll read them off one by one, and if you have any comment or questions, please speak up. Starting with the rain and reservoir report. Seeing none. Groundwater basin management efforts. Yes, Greg.
This obviously deals with the Dr. Opals Basin. And as far as the rate goes, I got a rain chart that was done in the basin by the airport area that covers the rainfall from 1869 to 1983. Out of the 113 years, there were 7 years that were possibly 50% or a little less. The rest of the years were all above or normal. I'm going to put together the rest of the years that are missing from 83 to the present. On Friday, this past Friday, there was a hearing in the quiet title action, which was a forest freight phase 4 trial, which talked about the prescriptive rights. The city of Paso Robles, the county, San Miguel, and Templeton collectively will receive 2,103 acre-feet of water. Paso Robles will get 1,200, almost 68 acre-feet. For Shandon and Santa Margarita will be 342. For San Miguel will be 145 or 185, and for Templeton will be 309. That'll be their water budget that's taken out of this if there's no surplus between what's being used by the overliers and what's left beneath the safe yield. There'll be a final deal on this in June. So this thing's coming to an end. They had to take there was a 10-year period of prescription 30 to 37 years ago. They had to take a grouping of 5 years that were consecutive, and that came up with their totals. They stipulated to those amounts, and the trial that was supposedly going to take 4 days took an hour and a half.
Eric.
A question on that. This is an annual figure. Who makes the determination as to whether there is a surplus and how much, and at what point in the year do those numbers get issued and by whom?
Well, I would think, and I'm not putting this in concrete yet, that the court's in charge and there'll be a water master, and the agencies that are involved all have water meters because they sell through their water meters to their service. So they'll probably take a portion of whatever their amount is during each month of the year, and they'll have to see whatever the rest of the budget is for the rest of the people that live in the area.
But you're anticipating the appointment of a water master.
If it gets to that point where people aren't being honest about their water use, the water that was turned in for the use like Paso Robles, they gave their pumping records for the whole period of time, but it didn't include like 3 golf courses that use 800 acre-feet a year. So there's some undetermined amounts that are being used within the city limits that are being pumped that aren't being recorded.
But we'll see a final judgment with all the details then at some point in the coming months.
In June.
In June, thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for that update. Michael.
The Groundwater Sustainability Commission for the San Luis Valley Groundwater Basin has a public meeting or a special meeting and public workshop a week from today at 3:30 in this building for interested stakeholders.
So what's the date on that?
That is the 10th.
Oh, one last thing.
Sure.
The reason me and Dennis weren't here last month was because they scheduled a committee meeting for the GSAs at the same time as this meeting was just sort of ending, that one was starting. So we needed to be up there in the basin area, otherwise we would have been here.
You were missed, but
there's
thank
stuff that happened at that that's going to be continued in April 24th.
Okay, thank you. Anything else on basins, groundwater?
I got
Oh, yeah. thanks.
So, what is known as the Northern Cities Management Area, that's Roy Grande, Grover Beach, Bisbee Beach, Oceano. We've been in the process of preparing a groundwater model covering the area from southern Pismo Beach to the Santa Maria River. And it's a very detailed product, it's not quite finished yet. We're going to be able to use it to determine safety yields and where to put in supplemental injection water and things like that. And I hope to be able to bring a presentation to WRAC sometime in the future.
Okay, thanks, Tom.
Excuse me, do you have any idea when in the future? Roughly?
At present, I'm thinking it's probably 5 months away.
Thank you.
So maybe September, we could start looking for that. September, October. Thank you. Anything else on groundwater basin management? All right, thanks for the feedback on that. IRWM?
Just a quick update for you. And it wasn't the call for projects wasn't completed when this staff report was done, but wanted to let you know that 13 projects from 11 different agencies were submitted for the grant that was open. And I'm anticipating presenting the selected projects to you next month. So keep a lookout on that. Any questions I could take after or now, but just want to provide that update.
Any questions or comments?
Is there, that's on the website, right, on the county website, as far as the projects?
Yes. Yeah.
The ones that have been submitted?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can you tell us which agencies submitted projects?
Yes. I
All
have a
of
list
them.
in my backpack that I could go off the top of my head. Avila Beach CSD, Cambria CSD, Cayuga Sanitary District, City of SLO, County San Luis Obispo, Los Osos CSD, Napomo CSD, Oceano CSD, San Simeon CSD, and the South San Luis Obispo County Sanitation District. I think that covered it. If I missed you, I'm sorry.
All right.
Yeah.
Great. Any other questions or comments? Thanks. Looking forward to results on that. Stormwater resource plan.
I'm here, but I'll be doing a presentation.
Oh, right. Okay. And then any various county water programs, policies, ordinances. Greg?
There's a bill that just passed one part, and I can't remember the number, AB 488 or whatever. It deals with stock ponds for on ranches and any place that you can put one in. It deals with diversions. If it passes the next committees, it will fast track the availability for ranchers and other landowners to divert rainwater and store it, which will help in the recharge of the basin. It's a pretty cumbersome thing that you have to do right now, and the measuring and all the fees and what you have to go through. And a bunch of years back, they had a program that made it real simple. It was a one-time fee, you register it with the state, and it was kind of done, and that's what they're trying to get back to.
And that's current state legislation?
Yeah, so yeah, hopefully where the bill originated from, and it's passed those first committees, now it's going to the next committees.
AB
488?
448.
440.
All right. Okay. Is that, yeah, Eric?
Can anyone anticipate a date for staff to come back to the Board of Supervisors with policies relative to the fractured rock areas? Apparently not, but we'll keep an eye out for it. It's sometime in coming months.
I might cover that in my next one with the budget
Oh,
as well.
okay.
Okay, I'll cover that. Okay, will be interesting to see about the diverting and recharge has been an interest of this committee, so keep an eye out for that, depending on how diversion happens. Right? Okay, and then any open reporting on water conservation opportunities, information, updates on that? Seeing none. Any comments from the public in general on this item? Trying to remember, make sure everybody gets a chance to speak. All right, moving on to item 4, review and discuss proposed San Luis Obispo County Flood Control and Water Conservation District budget for 2019-2020.
Leave it quicker for this, right?
What's that?
Leave it quicker for this. Front end. Is it up there?
No miles to.
Sure. Is that up there? Yes. All right. Hello, everyone. I'm Courtney Howard from the Water Resources Division in Public Works. I'm here to do our annual presentation of the Flood Control District budget, on which your committee advises the board. So it's going to be real similar to what you saw last year, or if you're new to the WRAC, it's going to be new. So I'm going to go ahead and walk through the framework that helps us set up and submit the budget going forward.
And sorry, Courtney, as you are going through this, as you begin, can you highlight if there are items that that the WRAC had in our conservation recommendations that you'll show up? Awesome, thank you. So keep an eye out for those 7 items that we, a few of the items that we had in our report. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for the reminder, too. So basically, I'll go over our budget management policy, which is part of your packet, starting on page 21. Talk about the priorities our Water Resources Division is working on. That's in alignment with the budget that was set up for this fiscal year and seeing going forward. And then we can dive into the actual budget documents and details. And my friend Harold is here for some of the additional finance questions you might have. So what I'm talking about today is for the San Luis Obispo County Flood Control and Water Conservation District. It has like 0.5% of the 1% pie. We also have some different zones that have their own allocations, but they have their own advisory committees and process for their budgeting. So I'm just talking about the zone, what's called Zone General for the Flood Control District. And again, the Flood Control District is the same boundary as the county, has the same 5 board members as its governing elected officials, but it's a different special act in the California Water Code. So if you look at the tax revenue, we get about $3 million a year to work with. And in setting up the policy, we wanted the board to establish how we should allocate, what priority we should use in allocating that $3 million to the different efforts that's within the flood control district's duties. And so we look at, sorry, that's okay. So first we look at, it's a regional agency, what are our regional commitments and programs that we've established, the IRWM program, regional data collection efforts, looking at regional water infrastructure that might benefit multiple communities. Then we look, our second kind of tier of budgeting is for any internal financing needs. Sometimes we have cash flow needs, or we have grants that come in and then have to go out. And so that's all accounted for in our category B, or second tier of priorities. And then, depending on how much we have left after accounting for those two, we can look at any sub-regional needs. And right now that's mainly geared towards groundwater management efforts. Next. So going back to what is the role of the flood control district? We can't solve all the problems in the county on $3 million. Wish we could. So our real role really is to make sure everyone has a common understanding of the water resources conditions throughout the county, create a vision for sustainability, what are our goals we're trying to achieve in our watersheds and groundwater basins and as a county as a whole. If we're not meeting those goals, what are the opportunities to meet those goals? And then how do we support solutions, get the beneficiaries organized and revenue generated to actually implement those solutions for the benefit of that area or those different people that are, or agencies that are partnering. So making sure we're looking at our existing needs, resiliencies through drought, and the future. So that's sort of our overarching program. And we've divided that into 5 programs. And these are largely implemented by our Water Resources Division through 3 units. We have a regional unit, a sub-regional unit, and a technical unit. So in the middle we have kind of our management and operations, so presenting the budget to you, preparing the budget, making sure that the other programs are running well, the Water Resources Advisory Committee. That's where we kind of put some of those overarching flood control district management efforts. We have our groundwater program largely focused on Sigma and other basins as we have resources. We have flood management and stormwater, looking at drainage studies and the stormwater management plan that you're going to hear about later. We have our IRWIM program, which you heard about earlier, and looking at regional resiliency. And then our technical program is where we collect all the data and present it to you. And you've seen a lot of that in your updates today. Next. So I'm going to walk through each program, and this is where I'm going to try to highlight where your recommendations fit in. So if you see numbers in there, that's where they show up in accordance with your numbered list. So one of my next priorities is to revisit our 5-year plan that we've been using and look even further. And so what is the crystal ball saying? It's very fuzzy. I'm probably going to develop maybe some scenarios. And I think a lot of it's going to hinge on potential outcomes with Sigma and what the GS Groundwater Sustainability Plan implementation phase looks like and what the flood control district's role in supporting those efforts is going to be. So I think I'll probably look at various scenarios. So that's something I haven't gotten started yet, but is going to be a priority over the next year or so. So it may look a little different next year when we present the budget again to you. Oh, thank you. So website overhaul, I'm very excited that we're very close to a new and improved slowcountywater.org. What we're envisioning is about 9 buttons from various topics: water quality, water data, water conservation programs, which is why I highlighted 2 and 5. So it looked like you were collecting different best management strategies and having a library of best management practices. And so I envision that product would live under that water conservation button on the new slowcountywater.org. And then we have drinking water and wastewater services, lakes and beaches, stormwater flood control, groundwater basins, creeks and watersheds, and then countywide planning. So those are kind of the initial 9 categories that we're working with, with the hope that all of the content pages could live under one of those 9 categories. And so we could just advertise slowcountywater.org, and you can find your topic of interest. And when you hover over it, you'll get a list of the things that are covered by that button. So that's the vision. So we're working on that over the next couple of months. Division resiliency, just making sure that we're well organized in the Water Resources Division to handle turnover or any changes, making sure that we have good checklists and procedural documents and good organization going forward. And then our division helps with the export ordinance oversight. So I just wanted to make sure that wasn't lost as a duty as different reports come in. We look into that. So the regional program, we're doing the IRW plan update, which Brendan mentioned earlier, and in addition to 2 more grant rounds through Prop 1, so we're in the first round of the grant, and then there'll be another one. So that's, where the Flood Control District is the lead agency for that program, so it's pretty high up in terms of not being able to drop it. It's pretty important to keep that program going and make sure we comply with the state's guidelines for the IRBM plan so that we remain eligible. One of the new initiatives that the county is leading is the Regional Infrastructure and Housing Plan. So we're going to engage with Carolyn Bird, who is leading up that effort, with the other cities and communities in the county, and we'll be helping with the water side of things. If we have certain housing allocation units that we need to put in the county and plan for, but how do we get resources and infrastructure to where those communities are taking those housing allocations. So that's a priority for the county, therefore it's a priority for our division to be engaged when they need us. Drought planning, we're updating the local hazard mitigation plan. I know a lot of the communities throughout the county, I think all but a few, are participating in that, so that will have a county-wide local hazard mitigation plan. So we're helping with the flood control aspects and the drought planning aspects of that plan. So again, it's got a grant and it's got deadlines, so we're pretty committed to making sure we're working on that. So not one we can drop. The Army Corps of Engineers is doing a disposition study for the Salinas Dam, which means they're developing a report that would outline the terms under which the dam could be transferred to a local owner, the Flood Control District being the logical owner. And so I anticipate that study being done throughout this year. It's not as active, but it's something that's underway that we have to stay engaged on. Planning efforts alignment lines up with your number 3 in terms of the RMS. The board authorized staff to revisit the RMS and how the biennial summary report's put together. One of the concerns is the timing of that report versus all the other reports that this report depends on. And so we've engaged with planning and ourselves, and actually Carolyn too, with the regional housing and infrastructure plan, to start talking about, okay, what makes a better sense in terms of the water element, water part of the RMS. And how can we do that a little more efficiently?
Sorry, most of us don't have those memorized. Can you just say number 3 on
sure.
our little chart there so people know which one we're talking about?
Yeah. Extend the required implementation of water conservation measures to include areas when designated as area severity 2 by the biennial RMS. So part of that is going to be understanding when we do the planning efforts alignment, one of the first tasks is, okay, how is the RMS used and what kind of ordinances or in what situations does the board make decisions based on those LOSs? And so that will be an important part of any kind of new approach to the biennial summary report.
Excuse me, in regard to the general plan and the housing plan, if you're sliding into RMS2 or RMS3, will you be working on the concept of not building anymore or taking somebody else's water so you could build? I mean, it's the issue that comes up time and time again. I'm just wondering what our responsibility here would be in terms of that kind of interaction with the whole general plan and growth of the county bit.
I don't know, Al, yet. It's very early on, and I think the overall process for developing the plan is still being articulated in terms of the steps and who's involved and how to vet the different aspects of the plan. But I can communicate back if that's what the WRAC is interested in keeping engaged on the water aspects of that plan. I can definitely communicate that back.
In that connection, relative to coordinating with the housing effort, my understanding is it correct that Carolyn is no longer formally part of the water division, and that the water division is then down by one person? And if so, will that position be filled or not? And what are the implications for the water divisions? Essentially, what we're looking at is the water division budget, as I understand it. What are the ongoing implications of that change?
Let's see, so Lawton is now heading up our groundwater program. So he's rotated from the regional unit to the sub-regional unit, which covers the groundwater program. Brendan was recently promoted to supervise the regional unit, which covers both the regional program and the watershed program. And then Ray oversees our technical program and is your secretary. That created kind of a ripple effect, and now we're recruiting to backfill Brendan and probably looking at an entry-level engineer for that. And I have an existing list, and I was calling them today. So.
And so this budget reflects the needed staff ongoing so that no one is overloaded.
Right.
Thank you.
We'll get it, yeah. And that's part of why I'm trying to provide the priorities and what we're working on. So try to keep in mind, okay, if there's more that comes, what we might need to let go of or what might be impacted. But there's, we just got the board direction to revisit that, and with the water connection, we're definitely engaged. I think earlier on, the three-legged stool is very much
just
active.
One follow-up question. The Salinas Dam disposition study, that's not a formal CEQA analysis of actually raising the dam. This is simply, but how does it, obviously we have a very obsolete EIR on a previous project from a couple of decades ago that is stale. How does this disposition study interface any possible future expansion project, any revisitation of the live stream agreement, et cetera, et cetera? And is it a CEQA? It's not a CEQA study then, is it? How does the public interface with it?
This one is largely led by the Army Corps, and they're kind of doing their own analysis of under what terms they would be willing to dispose of it or turn it over to the flood control district. So it's really giving us an understanding of under what terms they would be willing to do that, and at that point we can evaluate those terms and whether it's feasible on our end. And then at that point, if it was feasible, then we'd start to develop, okay, what does the project then look like? What are our terms under which we would take it? And for the flood control district, if there's, I think our interest would be that being able to optimize the storage in that reservoir, and that it has its own process of understanding the impacts and the benefits and decision making along the way, go, no go. For that. So it's just the first step in understanding even what the Army Corps would be willing to do.
Courtney, why, with the long-term situation that the use of the water from the reservoir has historically belonged to the city of San Luis Obispo, why would the Army Corps be looking at the county's flood control district to control that rather than the city?
I think it's maintaining the third party between North County and downstream releases and the beneficiary of the storage. And then also if we did go forward with the gates on the spillway, then it would be the flood control district partnering with the beneficiaries. It would become like a regional project, the additional storage. So, but mainly to maintain that third party position.
And is this study looking at the safety issues not only with the present dam, but in the event the added capacity if capacity were added and a lot more people were in the flood zone downstream?
Right now they're just this study only covers the existing structure, the safety of the existing structure.
Okay. So any future apportionment of costs, not only for gates, but for actual strengthening of the dam, which would probably be the expensive part, is a future bite out of some apple that it will be in someone else's hands, perhaps the county's.
Perhaps, yeah.
Thank you.
So very early on, but trying to understand the pieces of the puzzle first before decisions are made.
Courtney? Oh, go ahead.
I'm sorry.
No, go.
From the understanding from the paperwork that I've seen on the dam, when the dam was constructed or started in the beginning, it was supposed to be built twice as big as it is. So that would mean that the footing was already built to store the 45,000 acre feet instead of the 23,000 that it's in, because they moved the gate somewhere else because they felt at the time they need to complete it. So it's still owned by, the Army gave it to the Army Corps of Engineers. The Army Corps of Engineers put the county in charge, but they still own it. It's an unfinished permit. The permit's never been completed. So they need to complete their project at their expense before they hand it off to somebody else to maintain and take care of.
So how do I equate these things to your budgeting that you provided? Are they specified?
Yeah, I'll walk through that.
Okay.
Sorry.
No, that's okay. I did have one more question, just briefly, and maybe you're going to cover this too, but I noticed that the reserves kind of go down over your 5-year plan each year. Is there a kind of a plan for shoring those up, or does it just keep going down until it's 3.1, or how's that work?
I'll talk about it. Yep. All right. So the watershed program priorities, we're the floodplain manager. It's not every day, but when an issue comes in where we have to address mapping issues, we need to address it. We have staff allocated to support Zone 9's efforts in our division, our countywide stormwater plan finalization. For 1 and 6, that was both of those relate to stormwater recharge. So that will make us eligible for those types of projects. So that's why that's an important plan to finalize and get approved. We've got various drainage studies that were done in the early 2000s that are very out of date, and maybe even the solutions in there are old paradigms. So we want to revisit those, see what's been done, what's not been done, and for what was recommended to be done, maybe looking at it in the terms of the new stormwater framework and multi-beneficial projects framework. So maybe there's a new and improved approach to addressing some of the issues out there. And then we've got a lot of just different requests that come in all the time. And so we've got a robust list going, and so we need to come up with a strategy to prioritize those efforts. That's kind of another kind of establishing that framework. This is a relatively new program. It tends to get backburnered when we have other priorities. So we're trying to get it up and running and maintain it. But it gets stolen from sometimes, people-wise.
And I'm going to pause for just a sec to remind folks for our numbered action items from the conservation recommendation. So item 1 was the convening a joint WRAC subcommittee to look at groundwater recharge and conservation for ag. And then recommendation 6 was direct staff to analyze physical and regulatory parameters and expand groundwater recharge opportunities in both rural and urban environments.
Question. So kind of following on from that, are you going to address where county monies are in the budget to do what you just said?
Where our money is now is doing the plan that makes communities eligible for going for grants for those types of projects. For one aspect, and then in the groundwater program, I'll talk about different aspects of the recharge goals.
All right, keep going, and then we'll ask questions and discuss at the end. Thanks.
And then our technical program, our ongoing duty is to collect the data, of course, and report it. And we get a lot of public requests for data. We're updating our telemetry, modernizing that. We got a grant to do that, so that'll be helpful. We're developing our data management system in concert with a grant we got for developing the San Luis Obispo Valley Groundwater Sustainability Plan. A big part of implementing GSP is a data management system and reporting system. So we're leveraging that for that, working on that for that basin so that we can expand it to the other basins and have a consistent data management system across the county. And of course, we're still signed up as the CASGEM, which is the California Ground Elevation Monitoring Program. So we submit data from wells that have agreed to go fully public. to the state's database, and they display the levels there. And we try to fill data gaps in our county over time as resources allow. And then we've got our groundwater program. So again, this is recharge fits in here. Andy had read off those. So basically our top three, Paso Robles, San Luis, and Rio Grande, is where the county has a bigger role in moving those forward and partnering with the other agencies there. So I've kind of put those at the top. Our next three, there's either independent structures or we're not necessarily the lead. The Los Osos Subbasin has, their basin management plan, and so they have a basin management committee, and so we participate and support some of their efforts. Cuyama Basin is an independent entity, a joint powers authority. Supervisor Compton is on that board, and so as staff, we try to support her in reviewing all the different groundwater sustainability plan chapters. Tascadero Basin, same thing. They haven't quite got started, or they're just getting started with their groundwater sustainability plan. So we engage on review of those deliverables. And then this is where I can get back to Eric Greening's question. When I think it was February that we went to the board to talk about the Adelaide area, which is a fractured rock formation. There was kind of two outcomes. One was ask USGS if they'd be willing to study the area, and the other was come back with a more robust discussion about groundwater management throughout the county in terms of deeper wells and impacts between neighbors and what the county's authority is and different options, and looking more closely at other counties and what ordinances they have. So for the Adelaide area and talking to USGS, that's in our court, and so I'm working with them right now on a kind of a pre-proposal that outlines how they would do it and how much it would cost to take to the board to see if the board wants to go ahead and forward with that. The other part of it, the countywide groundwater management part of it, is in the planning support, and so they're working on their approach for going back to the board. They don't have that scheduled yet, and then I'll schedule the USGS one once I get their pre-proposal back. So could be in the next 4 to 6 months, I'd say, just depending.
But they would do Adelaide specifically.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you. And near the top of page 27, relative to the Cuyama Basin, it looks like we are helping fund a station on what's called Santa Barbara Canyon Creek near Ventucopa. That's in Santa Barbara County, and the Cuyama drainage. What's our role and our benefit with that?
Hey, Eric, can we let her finish hold that thought, and then let's go ahead and let her finish the whole presentation, then we can all ask questions.
So
Is that all right?
we'll have a later place to catch this?
Yeah, we'll catch all of them once we let her go. Thank you.
And then Santa Maria Basin, I don't want to forget. We participate as we can, but our effort is going to be focused on the Rio Grande Subbasin. I think you've gotten the update about the basin boundary changes, and now there's a Rio Grande Subbasin. So we'll be working on a GSP for that area, and making sure that we coordinate with the Santa Maria Basin is a big part of that.
I don't quite understand whether the county wears two hats here.
Sorry, David, I'm just let's hold all questions. Let's get through the whole presentation,
right.
And then I want to make sure that we have enough time to give specific feedback on budget. Thank you.
That's a lot for our groundwater team. Some of the independent basins, again, with going back to our policy of not being able to operate in everywhere all the time on a $3 million budget. We're trying to help some of these independent agencies or entities get up and running, but eventually we anticipate the effort there dropping off, and then being able to take on more. Going back to your study all fractured rock areas desire. Really, once these get up and running and self-funded and self-staffed, then we can move on to other areas. So that's kind of how it's been working. Paso Basin, we started there and are having trouble, haven't gone out of it. So it takes a long time to get an independent entity up and running and truly managing their area or implementing their programs.
Right. So as a reminder, item 4 was direct staff to plan, budget, and prepare hydrological studies for non-sigma basins and fractured rock sources, blah, blah, blah.
So those are the different programs we work on and the different priorities under those programs. I just wanted to highlight that of the $3 million, about 73% of it is labor. So we have there's a lot of administrative things to do. So a lot of it's labor, and then that leaves about $800,000 for just kind of general operations, buying new equipment, helping the RCD with their mobile lab irrigation program, partnering on different gauges, like the one Eric was mentioning earlier, and then any kind of technical studies. So we really do have to kind of prioritize and then run through each. However, we do have a kind of a historical reserve. It's at about $4 million right now. It's kind of one-time money, so it's not, we don't get $4 million every year in addition to the $3 million. So we've got to be kind of strategic about how we use that. And I think Tim was kind of mentioning that. Do we just chew into it over time? Or do we kind of keep it there for the next, Nacimiento project or next big infrastructure project where we know we'll need a big down payment? So that's some of the thinking. Right now, I'm being kind of conservative. We've been allocating to the groundwater basins, kind of just conservative chunks, because right now we're kind of partnering with the county and its general fund, and so I want to make sure we can get through this SIGMA and GSP adoption phase and have money available to make it happen. And I'm also a little bit concerned about the startup efforts, because might have to do rate studies. The first annual report for the Paso Basin is due in April, so we've got to come up with funding for, once the plan's adopted, funding for all of the things in the plan. And so I've allocated it, and we'll go over the document to SIGMA. But other uses could be just continuing this kind of cash flow loans, the category 2 or B priorities, grants coming in and out, but then also just a future match for infrastructure. So right now I have it allocated for SIGMA in the 5-year plan, which I think we can go over now. Yeah, okay, so. So there's kind of 2 main documents that have all the numbers. One starts on page 17. So this is the kind of tells you the different programs and the different allocations of money, what it looked like in the current year's budget, what we're asking for in next year's budget. And then at the bottom, there's some, just if you kind of wanted to look at the different groupings, the labor versus other projects. Something to keep an eye on, because I don't want labor rates to outpace the whole budget, because then we won't have money to do things. So that's something I wanted to track. So that's what this is for. There's a lot of detail, but I wanted to give you the overarching approach. But it's generally in line with what we did last year. The exception is the groundwater program. Again, the general fund, the county asked the political district to pay $750,000 to help with GSP efforts. So that's what happened the current fiscal year. We don't project that for next fiscal year, but I have my caveat in the staff report, subject to change, as we go into budget hearings in June. I haven't heard anything to make me change that yet, but I just wanted to put that out there. But in the 5-year plan, which kind of gets into more detail, I want to focus on page 20. So again, you'll see the priority A, B, and C that reflects, here's our best guess at the regional programs, and then the operational organizational needs. So you'll see a lot of grants pass through and some loans coming in and out. Some of our flood control zones need some help. So that's where we account for that. And then the category C is the different allocations for the different basins, and kind of cascading down as the different plans get adopted. And eventually, the expectation is that the management in the basin will be funded by the beneficiaries of the people in those basins. So that's, kind of the high level. And then if you wanted to get into the details, that's what these forms are for.
All right, thank you. Now, ask away. And let's circle back to Eric, then David, to pick up the loose end questions, if you still have them.
Yeah, I guess, what are we spending on that gauge in Santa Barbara County, and what is the benefit of this county, given that money is tight? This is like Upper Cuyama watershed near Ventura.
With the study of that basin, so we hadn't paid for, I don't think we paid for anything for studying that basin, and a part of it is in our county. And so our cost share came in the form of data, cooperating on that data, that particular gauge. And I believe, Ray, do you know if it's 3,000 or 13?
Yeah, well, the whole program with USGS is about 40,000, but so I guess 8,000 would be
8,000.
Yes.
And this is surface water, so it's not specifically a Sigma effort. It has more to do with like the downstream dam and all that.
I think it's for their model and understanding conditions in that basin, the whole water balance. Yeah.
I'm a little confused, and maybe I'm the only one here that's confused about the county's role in the SGAs. You had that sheet, and you had these groundwater basins in there, and the county's a participant in that. So when everyone sits down and forms the SDA and talks about what they're going to do and making the planning, is that part of your budget because the county is sitting in that seat?
Yes, the labor costs, yes.
Okay.
The plan, so the consultant, hiring the consultant, the cost of the consultant to develop the plan, that's in the county's general fund, and the labor to participate in hold meetings and develop agendas and review all the documents and provide feedback, that's the labor of our groundwater team.
Dennis?
Courtney, you mentioned in your presentation that USGS, you've been in discussions with them. Have there been any discussions with regards to their INSTAR program and their overflights to see if there's any more ground subsidence in our basins?
Yes, Angela's going to have that update at the next April 24th Cooperative Committee meeting for the Paso Basin, so we do have some feedback from them on that.
Great. And that'll include costs?
Yes.
Good.
I noted that there is just under $34,000 that will be budgeted for RCDs for the mobile lab evaluations for next budget year. I wonder what needs to be done to increase that amount of money. The reason I ask is that I know the Upper Salinas, Los Pobres RCD does a number of evaluations and has to turn away prospective evaluations every year because for lack of funds. The landowners can pay for the service, but the smaller ones don't. And the mobile lab is kind of to sharpen the water conservation efforts.
I think two things come to mind. Maybe having, I could ask the RCDs to submit that information, how many people they've had to turn away, because the 15, I think we do 15,000 for each RCD for their programs.
A bit more.
Okay. So understanding how many they have to turn away, that would be good to know. Also, I'm anticipating with the GSPs best management practices of a, or I don't know what you want to title it, a water use efficiency program. I'm envisioning that would probably be a key part of any implementation of the groundwater sustainability plans, because they're going to want to make sure everyone's using water as efficiently as possible before they have to think about cutbacks or really expensive projects. So I think that might be another upcoming opportunity to have more funds into that program.
Can the RCD submit a letter to you in the meantime, and then tell when do they have?
Well, let's see, probably budget hearings, but you'd probably want to get it in sooner, probably in April.
Thank you. One other question, kind of a different topic, and that has to do with the county's role in supporting and promoting groundwater recharge efforts in areas, non-SGMA areas, rural areas on private lands. In the stormwater plan and in IRWM projects, almost all of them are submitted by CSDs and cities. But the watersheds, floodplains, and the water that is available is dominantly not in those areas. And it's been my observation over several years that it's hard to get little projects in the rural areas submitted to IRWM or even the stormwater projects. A couple of them did get through. To have them in a state of development that they can compete. And so they don't. But volumetrically, they are very significant, or can be significant. And people have been very frustrated in the past. Now I'm becoming frustrated because these projects just can't get traction, but they're valuable. What role will the county have, and where in the budget is county money to support such projects?
Isn't there now? But
it's awfully hard. If it were easy, I wouldn't be asking.
Yeah.
It's not easy. And the projects are, in terms of acre feet, they're vastly greater than projects that just sail through in CSEs and cities, or appear to sail.
Hopefully, we can get SGMA up and running and those basins self-funded so that that energy and money can come back, and then we can work in other areas.
So the answer is nowhere right now.
Nowhere right now.
What can we do to maybe accelerate that? Because these projects are not trivial. We talk
And that was part of our recommendations as far as, kind of the high level, high impact strategies. Yeah.
So it was a recommendation, but is it not going to be picked up?
Right. I think that's a fair question.
I think until we can redirect our energy from SGMA, we wouldn't have, in the flood control district I'm talking about, wouldn't have the resources right now to advance those projects. But I guess what you could do is support self-funding of GSPs once they're adopted.
Yes, I also wonder if, in a general way, maybe an easier way to do it would be if county somehow could fund some efforts in the RCDs, which are out there in the rural areas. I know it's money, it's your budget, it's priorities, but it's real.
I think that's something to talk about too. Once the GSPs are adopted and we get a sense of how much money, what ask of the flood control district to get those up and running. Once we have an understanding of that, then we'll know how much we have to commit to these other initiatives that we want to get going because they are regional in nature. So don't give up. It's in our head. We're trying to get our watershed program up and running. That's where I would envision that support coming from. If we can get it going.
Okay, Christine, then Greg.
Thank you. Courtney, there are multiple categories where the proposed budget is less than it has been previously. Is this a reflection of SGMA? Is SGMA taking a large proportion of the cuts that are being made in other categories?
I'm not sure which specific ones. I know there was an
on this way, we're down almost 900,000. We're down almost 900, almost $1 million on the total uses of monies there. labor is down too. I'm just talking on these first 2 pages here, these colored pages, and then I noticed in several different categories that there's less funding recommended for this coming year than last year.
Some of it's from labor. I had budgeted last year for an admin assistant, and that person's actually charging to the county general fund for Sigma efforts. So my budget estimate went down a little bit on labor. Overall, I think we might have just been adjusting to actuals, looking at actuals, and maybe we've less expensive people working on the projects. That was part of it too.
Thank you. And one other question having to do with Zone 9. I was going to follow up on that. I said there's $60,000, and I believe that's what we worked out as our budget for Zone 9. But is there any reporting in here that I'm missing about the reserves that are supposed to be in there for the eventual mid-year bypass project and future funding? I thought there were some reserves stashed away, but they're not showing here.
No, yeah, I don't have it. This is just the flood control zone general. So the Zone 9 reserves would show up in their budget, which I don't have here today.
Thank you.
Great.
Yeah, to continue with the recharge pond, could this body or your office just make some or write some letters to like about AB 448 that's dealing with fast tracking ponds in good recharge areas that are in the watershed areas. Examples being in a good water year like this year, which was 2 years ago, it happened. The same thing was, I'm going to use just my property as an example and those rain totals. I have 362 acres. I've had 37 inches of rain. My land was full after 10 inches, but we'll just say 12. The rest of that water's run off into the Wero through Preston, so it's all recharging the basin. And where it goes from there, I don't know, but there's a lot of good areas that the county could come up. We don't have money, but you can fast track permits. You can make things easier for guys to be able to do the work themselves with standard type of weirs and projects that would be acceptable. So if this bill gets passed, and if the county was to say that they would like this bill to get passed, that some of these things could be done in more of a rapid fashion so that they're there when we do get the next rains. The basin without the watershed is 505,000 acres in Paso Robles. If a foot of water falls on that, that's 505,000 acre feet of water. We use less than 100. The rest of that water is running off. And if half of it soaks in, that makes pretty good dent in any kind of thing. Better than making $1 million projects to try to inject water into the ground when we're letting our rain runoff just run away.
To your point about different legislation that helps facilitate more recharge projects, I think for our lobbyist and our county administrative office and the legislative platform, they kind of track those things and weigh in when it lines up with our legislative platform.
Tim, and then Eric, one last question, and then let's wrap up and do deliberation if we'd like to take a particular action.
Courtney, the kind of along the lines of Christine's comment, it appears that the budget is being reduced in a pretty robust economy. I mean, doesn't it seem like we would have the same budget at least or more this year from last year? I mean, how is that shaped internally? I mean, is somebody saying, hey, this is what you have to work with, go do it? Or are you trying to come up with something? Because, I mean, this project here is a perfect example of something that could rise to the top as far as, needed money.
So a large chunk of the well, 900,000 was the 750,000 that we gave to the county general fund. They haven't asked for that again, so that was a big chunk of that is because of that. And so what I have allocated for Sigma this time doesn't include a chunk, but it does include an allocation to each of the basins in category C.
Yeah, I saw that.
So that's the large driver of why it went down. Again, I'm trying to be a little bit conservative with the amount of kind of reserve we have, and that's kind of allocated there in the regional resiliency line in the category C of page 20. So there's kind of a $4 million there. And again, that's the question of, do we draw that down over time with a bunch of projects, or do we save it for a cost share on the next big infrastructure project? Because once it's used, it's gone. So right now, I haven't asked to allocate it to various regional projects until we kind of get through Sigma and see what implementation is going to require. So I think there's going to be some significant policy discussions coming up this next year. And I think that $4 million that is for special projects is probably going to be a big part of that conversation. Should it go towards the first 2 years of Sigma implementation until rates or fees get established? Should it be for desal in the future, or regional intertie, or Sinistan? Or should it be for advancing all of the watershed projects we have throughout the county? So I think that's going to be a big part of the that future projection, the new projection planning I was going to work on. So definitely going to take that as a scenario, the other as a scenario, this is a scenario to say, if it doesn't self-fund, this is what it looks like. If it does self-fund, this is what we could accomplish. If we're not doing Sigma implementation, these are the needs throughout the county that we're hearing from the WRAC and others. Drainage, our list of drainage programs or projects. So that's definitely one of my bigger priorities this coming year, is to work all that out in light of Sigma implementation phase.
All right. Eric, do you...
George Kendall made a suggestion worth investigating relative to upping our contribution to the RCDs for targeted toward like watershed and recharge projects. Currently, the county's contributions are not under our purview. They're in the category of contributions to outside agencies, like the contributions to nonprofits, Arts Obispo, and so on. But do you think it could be appropriate that in addition to that contribution, some of the regional resiliency money might be funneled through the RCDs that are closer to the ground? And if so, would we be wanting the RCDs to actually develop programs and solicit that funding in that particular category, or should the county's funding stay in the contributions to outside agencies silo? And then we'd just be advocating as individual citizens. How would that work?
That's a good question. I think I'd have to think more about how that might work, whether it's almost like continuing to hire, I guess, to allocate funds to the RCD versus hire them to do work. I guess we do hire them from time to time to do work, so it could be through that mechanism.
Partnering with them on shared objectives. They definitely are close to the ground in some very important ways. Thank you.
So with this item, we have an opportunity to consider action, to receive the report and consider action. If there's something that we wanted to support the budget as proposed, support the budget with a recommendation to perhaps use reserve funds or somehow increase the funding to support what is our recommendation. Is that 3, 4, 5, 6? Our recommendation 6, which we've already forwarded to the Board of Supervisors, about the parameters to analyze physical and regulatory parameters and expand groundwater recharge opportunities. we could, that could be a recommendation, for example, take whatever motions folks want to put forward, but something that says, hey, we think, waiting for SIGMA to be done is maybe we're missing a window of opportunity.
I'm not quite sure how to handle this, but groundwater is obviously the big theme of the day, and we've got a minus $883,000 reduction on that. And I don't understand how that works. If I reading this right, on the sheet with the yellow bars that goes across it, groundwater management program has a drop from 2,430,000 to 1,547,000. And I don't understand how all the things we're doing with groundwater are managed by a reduction in budgets. And if I voted to approve anything, I wanted to understand that a little better if I could.
Sure. This current fiscal year, the county asked the flood control district to contribute $750,000 to its share of SIGMA efforts. And so we transferred $750,000. We wrote a check to the county for covering GSP development. This year, this coming fiscal year, they haven't yet, maybe, asked the flood control district to contribute beyond what it's already contributing in terms of allocations to each basin within its own budget and staffing. So that's why that number went down. But there's still, so that's being, that 750 is being picked up by the general fund instead of being asked to be transferred. So now we can. Again, what's not being transferred is reflected in the $4 million on the regional resiliency line, of which is one-time money that, over the course of this year, considering SIGMA implementation and other needs throughout the county, how should that be used? So that's the main reason I went down.
Okay, so otherwise we can just receive and file. We don't have to take action. We don't have to have any comment.
I like the way you were going a little while ago. You have a much better way with words in situations like this regarding considering providing funding for, and Eric, what he mentioned, funding for RCD efforts to evaluate, prioritize, promote groundwater recharge studies and efforts and projects to recognize, evaluate, if there's money that's available.
And I feel like it could start relatively small in the next funding cycle, $20,000, $50,000, something to start to develop a vision about how we can, capture the little guys, how we can use that as seed money for some other program, etc. But it seems like if there's not something in there to get it started, then I don't see how else to get that recommendation going.
I would
That's a
totally agree.
motion.
What's that, Tim?
I would totally support that. I think that's a great idea.
So where would we get the money?
So, not to start picking at the reserve, but maybe pick at the reserve just a little, because I feel like that's a big investment. It's a relatively small amount to be able to allocate to a program that we collectively feel is really critical. That we, if we had that in place this year, we'd have a lot more water in the ground, I guess is more available, stretched out. Christine.
I would like to suggest a motion. I move that we receive and file the proposed flood control water conservation district budget for 1920 with the recommendation that in the next budget cycle we find funds to, defer to George's language, allocations to RCDs for small
or other means
or other means for
to promote groundwater recharge.
Thank you.
I'm ready to say
Projects.
that I would like clarity by next budget cycle. Are you saying not in the 1920 budget, but something to look at over the horizon?
That's what I'm saying, because
Yeah,
at
because
this
we
point, we
haven't
have a
actually
lack of
heard.
we have a lack of resources showing up here. Our resiliency is down. I mean, our reserves are down already in this
Right.
budget, and we're putting so much to Sigma, and that's coming down on us from the state and the board, who said, okay, you don't have to pay for it for your we'll pay for it. But so I'm looking at the next budget cycle to make sure that that is a strong recommendation. But to receive and file this budget, with appreciation to all your hard work. This complicated stuff, really, I think. That would be my thought.
I'll second that with the assumption that we're going to actually communicate with the RCDs so that they can tell us how they would use the money before we get around to that succeeding budget year.
Right, is it necessarily the RCDs? I'm not sure.
I don't see why we couldn't nip off a little bit to, because, you know, it's very possible that could get eliminated in the course of the budgeting. You know, and I think we ought to put it out there on the table now and get something going. It's sort of like
Kind of the planning part now and maybe implementation
bite
later.
at it and see if we can get the ball rolling. Personally,
I appreciate it. So may I amend?
Sorry, I've got, okay, Christine, do you want to amend?
I was going to propose an amendment to the, accept the, receive and file with the request to add or find or reposition monies for RCDs and groundwater recharge projects.
For groundwater, for perhaps an analysis at this time, or included in this budget cycle, of some investment into groundwater.
That would be the only change, recommended change to this budget at this time, but then we would receive and file it as it has been distributed to us, with the request that we have that additional line item funding.
Okay, so some funding toward this budget cycle.
That's right.
Toward groundwater recharge opportunities. Craig, do you still want to?
I'll second.
Still second, okay.
Yeah.
Greg, it's getting messy, I know.
Yeah, I would really like to see, I mean, I know it takes a little bit of money, but I don't think it takes very much to write letters to the proper people to see that this is a very important subject that needs to be done, and also to the GSPs that are, or to the GSA cooperative groups that are already formed, that this should be something that they should be a high priority in their GSP that they're putting together right now, because we don't need to buy water from somebody else to try to put it here. We have water here that we're not capturing, and these projects would be better served and however we can help. You know, they didn't have any problem finding $1 million to try to push AB 2453 on the people up there. They didn't have any problem finding 1.1 or 1.2 million a year for the 6,000 acre feet of Nasi water that we never received, that those agencies got to the tune of $7.2 million. So I don't think finding 20 grand or something should be that difficult.
Okay, thanks. Tim?
Well, the other thing is that, you know, if we can get that inserted in, it propels us to be able to advocate for that, you know, outside of this group. And I think that's what we all are seeing as being a desired outcome for this coming budget. I do want to add that, I mean, I can't even tell you how advanced this is from what we used to get. I just want to say thanks to Courtney for this doing an amazing job. We used to argue for an hour over putting together a committee to look at this thing. So really great job.
Yeah. I'll just add, I think what you're asking is doable. In my head, I'm like, who am I going to sign it up? So putting the line item for the budget, I could see that just adding another line under priority A, you know, stormwater recharge planning or something to that effect, and giving it a budget. I can't guarantee that we'll have staff to do anything for a little bit, but hopefully once the stormwater management plan's up and we get RE1 on board, so maybe there's some hope for advancing that. But again, it's not that it's not being done, it's just the way, we're doing a stormwater plan so we can be eligible, we're working on the GSPs where stormwater capture is the top priority, it shows up in different ways, and I know there's other areas that want to advance as well. So it's not forgotten, it's just showing up in different ways.
So Courtney, what I hear you saying is that this is the kind of thing, and does it help if we move a motion forward that has a specific dollar amount, or is it appropriate to have it be vague and you kind of get our intent and fold something in that we would report on?
Yeah, if you're okay with the idea of the direction being to add a line item under category A for recharge management planning on your 5-year plan, I mean, I'm happy to do that.
We're thinking about an RCD doing, not your staff doing.
And that's okay. It's not necessarily, we have consultants with each of these things probably too. So.
Can I suggest a feasible amount?
Well, I tend to lean towards 25 or 50 as my placeholders.
So 50?
Higher is better, yes.
Yeah, they can always go down, but they're not going to go higher than we recommend.
This would include exploring opportunities to partner with RCDs. They haven't yet come to us, but they are obviously potential partners on the ground.
Okay, so a couple, let's Dennis and then George.
There's a bit of a time crunch because the GSPs are being developed. And I think if you act sooner rather than later, it would behoove the committee to do so. What we're looking at here is on the GSPs, and they have to be submitted and so forth, but perhaps more than a one-pronged approach here. You can talk money, that's a good thing. However, with the GSPs being formed, a letter from the committee to all the specific GSPs that are formulating these plans, because this idea has been floated up in North County, that would carry a little more weight to keep the momentum going on this. So I would encourage that. The other thing with the other aspect is with regards to the legislation that allows for storage on private property. If another letter could be sent on that, we keep the momentum going, and it shows that there is a consensus from an advisory body that this is a good thing to be pursued. So I would encourage that money can come next year if you want to do it that way. However, in the short term, I think those things need to happen sooner than later.
Okay, thank you.
I don't think a position on AB 448 is on our agenda today, but we could put it on for next month to review and see if we
Yeah, I
want to
don't know what the timing is, but I would certainly want to review it before. Okay, Georgia, last comment?
Just a little comment with regard to projects. I don't think there will be much problem getting RCDs come up with projects. I spoke with Devin Best today. We've got currently 125 gallons per second flowing by my place in Santa Rosa Creek. And it's been flowing at higher rates since sometime in January. There's lots of water we can do stuff with, and it'd be good to have a mechanism so we can capture something.
Right, it seems like a lot of it is a systemic, how are we removing barriers, how are we encouraging? All right, so we have a current motion. I'd like to go ahead and move forward. What's that? Yes, we will restate the motion, and it's evolved a little bit. Let me make sure. Receive and file with appreciation for the current budget with the recommendation to add a line item for recharge management planning in the amount of $50,000. And that's Christine and Eric. Evolved a
that was
couple.
Groundwater recharge.
Groundwater recharge, yes, groundwater recharge management planning. And implementation. Okay. And then before I do that, I just want to make sure that all members, voting members, public members, does anybody else want to comment before we take a vote? Okay. And Ray says we can do a voice vote, so all in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, say nay. All right, motion carries. Thank you so much. All right, and with that, we're running a little long, so what I'd like to do on the agenda is we'll go ahead and receive the presentation on the stormwater resource plan, and then otherwise the kind of our general update. We're going to have the Board of Supervisor Districts report on their local water issues. We'll postpone that to next meeting, and bylaws will also postpone. So we'll just receive the presentation, quick check-in on agenda items, and call it the public comment. Is that all right with everyone? Agenda modification. All right, and with that, we will now have a presentation of stormwater resource plan by...
Just stepped up.
Okay, so let's, while we have just a moment, let's look ahead to the future agenda items. I just wanted to give you a heads up. You're just about up. You good, or did it die?
Oh, I just had used.
Okay. So just on the agenda items for May, we're having a presentation on desal. It says budget follow-up for...
Yeah, that got moved today.
Today.
So, yeah.
Okay. So if there's any follow-up, will we see budget again, or that was it?
No, that was it.
Okay. It'd be nice to get an update on if
we'll
that's passed. Okay. And then an update on the San Antonio Tunnel and the Board of Supervisor Districts. In June, we're getting watershed-wise landscape report. Workshop to be able to understand that. We take off July and August, and then September we'll have climate change report from the Regional Water Quality Control Board and its impact on water resources. Eric.
I think I heard that we were going to review the language of AB 448, decide whether we support, oppose, or take a position, at least recommend that the board do. And then relative to the summer off, that may depend on the timing of a comment period on a draft DIR on the tunnel for San Antonio, and whether we form a subcommittee that generally a subcommittee on it can't act on its own. And so if there's a comment period right there in the summer, we might want to convene to adopt or modify any recommendations of the subcommittee that's reviewing that DEIR when it comes out.
Good. Noted. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good point. Okay, anything else?
Yeah, maybe.
Oh, sorry.
We'll have the IRWM application recommendation from the RWMG. Should be in May as well.
May, terrific.
So is there an IRWM committee meeting in the morning of that day?
There is. And if a decision is made for an application, we will present that in the afternoon.
Okay, thanks.
And I have a few handouts. There might not be enough, so I apologize. There's Andy gets them.
Thank you.
Hello everyone, I'm Sarah Crable with the County Public Works Department, and I'm going to be presenting about the Stormwater Resources Plan, which we have submitted to the State Board. So this is just going to be a huge recap and background about the development of the plan, and then some timeline information for what's going to happen next. So I'll just cut to the chase and get down to what happened. We did have public and stakeholder meetings, 3 of them, starting off in February 2018, and then the second meeting was in June 2018, and then the third meeting was September 20th. It was in the middle of the public draft review period. And then I also did various outreach meetings to disadvantaged communities in August. And I went to San Miguel, Cal Valley, Shandon, Los Osos, San Simeon, and Grover Beach. And sorry, the handouts I will reference them in a little bit. So
Okay, and then we had a 30-day comment period for the public draft. So we got various comments back from that. And the final draft was supposed to be submitted at the end of November, but due to some comments we received, we pushed that back to February 28th. And we are expecting concurrence from the State Water Resources Control Board in May 2019, so in 2 months. And what happens after that, I'll get into it a little bit more, but the IRWM, which Brendan oversees, there is the RWMG, which is the group within the IRWM, I guess. There will be a working group potentially created, and that working group will be where the stormwater resource plan is housed and operated and implemented and decided upon. So that will be brought to the RWMG meeting in May or June this year. And everyone should be on the lookout for this, and I'll keep reminding everyone. Prop 1, Round 2 implementation funding will become available likely fall 2019 or maybe even into the winter. So I'll talk more about that. So what is the Stormwater Resource Plan? Senate Bill 985 requires a stormwater resource plan as a condition of receiving state bond grant funds for stormwater capture and dry weather runoff projects. So to be able to have a stormwater resources plan, the county decided to work with a few other agencies that had maybe already started some efforts or already had a plan in place. So that was the City of Arroyo Grande, Upper Salinas Los Taveras RCD, the Central or the Coastal San Luis RCD, and then the City of San Luis Obispo. So we collaborated to produce this plan, which was submitted to the State Water Resources Control Board. There also was some match funding from our WM planning grant, but I don't want to get too detailed. Okay, so why do stormwater capture? I think you guys all understand that through that long big discussion. But for those of you who just maybe aren't on the same page yet as us, we, traditionally it just goes out to the ocean. So we want to research various ways to keep that in our groundwater basins. And the county is choosing to view stormwater as a resource. And so are there reasons, I'll just forget that. But the other part of this is dry weather runoff, which may not be as large of a deal in this county because we're not as urbanized maybe as Southern California, but there are projects for capturing contaminated water that also qualify for this project or also qualify for this plan. And so a couple of examples are irrigation runoff, if it can't be infiltrated just because of contamination, for example, or industrial processes that have some sort of contamination. There is possible funding for projects that may prevent that contamination from getting into the groundwater or the environment. So, like I said, the county was choosing to view groundwater as a resource. The development of this plan is completely voluntary, but it does make public agencies and nonprofits, 501(c)(3)s, eligible for grant funding. So with this plan in place, it just makes us eligible for the funding. And going through this process, it was pretty helpful because in the outreach meetings, we were able to see what different communities really put on their priority list, as well as the submitted projects that came about from those communities engaging with us. And essentially, the Stormwater Resource Plan is covering the entire county. It's looking at the county holistically. It's not just looking at the city of Oro Grande or just the county areas or just the city of San Luis Obispo. We had participants from all of the areas, which I will talk about. And so I talked about Prop 1 funding potentially, but what are the opportunities for grant funding? So we don't know exactly how they will fund stormwater projects, but as the county goes forward with this, we do believe that they aren't going to be looking at the state grant funding will not be looking at stormwater projects as just flood control. They will be looking at them in ways that have multiple benefits, which I will get into. But so Prop 1 specifically is for the Stormwater Resource Plan. There was $7.5 billion, $200 million specifically for stormwater, and there was a round 1 implementation that has already passed for $80 million, and that happened where there were larger cities or counties that were just already ready with their plans. They knew that this was coming. They had the funding to create their plans. And their plans were in place when that funding came available. So for round 2, that's going to be coming open, like I said, maybe fall or winter 2019. The state doesn't know for sure yet, but there's statewide $90 million that's available. So as soon as we reach concurrence with this plan, that means that those projects that are in our Stormwater Resource Plan will be eligible. And then, like I said, there are other opportunities. So Prop 68 for flood protection, there's $500 million, and it's likely that it's not just going to be flood protection. That's a priority. These projects will have to meet multiple benefits. And then there is also the opportunity for disadvantaged communities to receive matches or have opportunities to not have to be so far along in their design process or their CEQA or permitting process for their projects. So just letting you guys know that some of these projects don't have to be shovel ready depending on where they're located at in our county. So I'll talk about the Stormwater Resource Plan development. There is a technical advisory committee that forms. So that first page of the handout shows the map of the different areas in this technical advisory committee, and it is based off of watersheds and community needs within those areas. So there's 9 different TAC areas. So this technical advisory committee was asked or tasked to reach out to project proponents within their areas and ask people or agencies to submit projects to our Stormwater Resource Plan project list. So these are the 9 technical advisory committee areas. And then these are the representatives that participated in the TAC. I'm going to skip this one. So what I keep mentioning this multiple benefits, and it's really like the main goal of this stormwater resource plan. So for a stormwater project or a dry weather runoff project, the project has to meet at least 2 or more of these main benefits. And the main benefits are water quality, water supply, flood management, environmental, and community. And then there's additional benefits that, you can kind of check off as many of those as you want. And on the second page of the handout, it just shows kind of examples of what the state board guidelines specify about that. So water quality, contributing to the compliance with applicable permitting and regulatory requirements. So increasing filtration or treatment of runoff. This is an example of a sedimentation basin or capture project in Paso. Water supply. So does it help improve water supply reliability or conjunctive use? And this is, I guess, it's called Fox Hollow, a reservoir that is no longer being used but can be rehabbed for a project with the city that is also being looked at by by Creeklands to help supplement creek flows. Flood management. So does the project help decrease the flood risk and reduce runoff rate and or volume? This is Oceano, where the RV park always gets flooded every year, and the county is working on a project for that. Environmental, does it help improve the environment or help the any sort of species that are in that creek or in that area? And how does it benefit the community? Does it provide jobs? Does it provide beautification, public education opportunities? So to get into project scoring and evaluation, that technical advisory committee, they were able to help us get 35 projects submitted to the stormwater resource plan. And we had a scoring sheet for these projects. So on the third page of the little packet, it shows what our scoring sheet looks like. And we have those 4 of those 5 benefits. We assigned values to them or numbers to them. So the community one, we couldn't really assign numbers to it or numerical values, so that one isn't included. But we have a water quality, you get a scoring out of 10, water supply, same thing. And so all of these projects that were submitted, they went through this scoring process. Flood management and environment. And then we have a project list that has the watershed group, so which one of those 9 TAC areas was it in? What was that metric score based off of the that evaluation sheet or scoring sheet? And then for community, we had a bit of a different scoring system. It's either like as open circle, a circle with a dot, or a fully closed circle. And that's also explained at the bottom of the 5th page of the handout. And then there's some other unquantifiable benefits of or information about a project. Is the project ready? How much is the value of performance, or how is the project rate with value and performance compared to other projects in the area? Environmental, and then does it include coordination, collaboration with other agencies in the county? And that's kind of going to be a huge thing, I think, going forward. Speaking about these groundwater recharge projects, I know that there are maybe these smaller one-off projects that we keep thinking about are possibilities, but I think this group and, you know, even the RWMG, like when looking at these projects, we're going to have to kind of group these projects together to be able to present them when grant funding is available, so that they look like they're a substantial contribution to the county and to the watershed. So I know that you know, the little guy might get overlooked, but we have to look at opportunities for collaboration and keep that in mind.
Question, have you guys talked to the National Estuary Program? Because they, especially in the early days, had a lot of EPA money that came in on reducing first flush issues. It was a major issue also with sedimentation, and they were talking about water retention, which the Resource Conservation District was involved in and other such groups, to try and hold water from pumping fast into Morro Bay. So there's an awful lot of collaboration done by them in the 80s, maybe 1980s, 90s, mid-90s. It'd be worth talking to them about what they found. But I do remember when looking into this that there were weird things that were good. For example, EPA found that if you did street sweeping at a certain frequency, you raised the water quality of runoff enormously because you've got all that dog poop out of the gutters, you know, and that sort of thing. And I don't know whether that will be included in this kind of thing, or we really are centering on also saving water to groundwater as a sub-theme of all these projects.
I guess that is kind of a sub-theme. I get what you're saying, but maybe mistakenly so. But without a doubt, it's 2 out of those 5 benefits. So it does not have to be groundwater recharge. It can be flood protection and environmental. It does not have to have a groundwater recharge component. So sorry if I gave that impression. And then the Morro Bay National Estuary, yeah, they were involved as far as I know in this process, you know, coming to stakeholder meetings and yes. So
Courtney, we just have a few minutes
Sarah,
left to
yeah.
kind of, Sarah, sorry.
Okay. I wish I looked at Courtney. Okay. All of this is posted online, and all of the scoring and all of the calculations, all the appendices are also online on our Stormwater Resource Plan website. But here's a project that was submitted, a recharge project from Devon, from the Upper Salinas Los Tablas, on farm or on private property. I guess they're just these basins for groundwater recharge, you know. So if we were able to get like 10 property owners to do it, I don't know, that could be a thing. But also the city of Atascadero, an example project of what was submitted, they were going to have these infiltration basins in their under their park there. So going forward, just to reiterate, the concurrence is expected May 2019. Once it hits once the working group is created, some of these fine details will get hammered out because that working group isn't created, so I don't know exactly how this will all look yet, but this is going to be a living document with adaptive management. There is a project list that is closed, and it will be opened annually, and there will be that working group that will meet annually or pending funding availability, and there will be someone that will assist with scoring and reviewing the scoring, because this is supposed to be a self-scoring project application. And then there will be, hopefully that working group can help group projects together so that when there's funding available, it can beef up a grant application. And I didn't mention this yet, but the most important part about submitting a project is these projects have to have a project proponent. There has to be someone that is going to be developing this and applying for the funding and filling out all this paperwork. It's not like we can, like the county can just, okay, add a project to the list without someone being behind that project.
Is there a requirement that the project be shovel ready? I know that was, the thing with the earworm projects, they had to be quote unquote shovel ready.
It is not a requirement to be on the project list. A lot of these are not, most of these projects are not shovel ready that were submitted. So, and then that list will be updated as projects move on and off, or as they become more shovel ready so that they can update their scoring. Yes.
Is Prop 68 funding being handled in a whole separate process than the Prop 1 funding? How does one get into the loop on that? And are all of the criteria, I guess it was passed about 10 months ago, are all of the criteria now solid and fixed?
I actually don't know.
If it's the SB 985 was specific to stormwater capture project and any future state bond grants. So Prop 68, Prop 1, anything going forward would this plan in place makes any project that is a stormwater capture project, whatever that's defined as, to be eligible.
So whether the money comes from 68 or from 1, you go through the same hopper, is what you're saying.
And just to be specific, I didn't read the code, but it didn't say that the project has to be listed in the plan, or that even has to rank in the plan. There just has to be a plan in place. That was the...
Right, 68 was partly competitive grants and partly named projects.
Yeah, there is, the IRWM plan is connected to the IRWM funding part, and specifically, the stormwater resource plan isn't connected to any particular funding source.
It'll take what it gets.
Right, correct.
Thank you.
And let's go ahead and let Sarah finish your presentation, and then we'll see if there's any time left for questions.
I'm done.
Oh, well, that was great.
Feel free to call me. It would be great or email me. It would be great if you would like updates to sign up for our mailing list on the website, which is right there, or you can search Stormwater Resource Plan, SLO County. You can find that.
Great, thank you so much. Any last minute question, comment on that item? Great, thank you so much. And then our final item then for today is just a public comment for any item, for anything that is not on the agenda. So any of those public comments? Okay, and with that, we are adjourned until our next meeting, and we're across the street again at City Hall. All right, thanks everyone. Adjourned.
Rebel.